Number of assisted care homes in the state is getting smaller. The concern is to make sure aging seniors have a strong support system.
To address the issues, 6 News' Joe Harris talked to an organization and a state lawmaker about what they have in mind.
The Nebraska Healthcare Association says 10 nursing homes and assisted living facilities closed across the state in 2022. The cause? President and CEO Jaylene Carpenter says it's because the aging population in rural areas is outpacing the number of younger people who can support them.
So many of these residents who lived in these facilities are having to go a much greater distance and further away from family.
She says it would make things worse if a new proposal by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services goes into effect. Every day, nursing homes would be required to provide each resident a half hour of care from a registered nurse and 2.5 hours of care from a nurse's aide.
If the minimum staffing rule goes through as it is today, I can guarantee there will be closures across the state.
She says since Medicaid pays for most residents, states should continue determining what staffing in nursing homes should be.
The state is funding the majority of people who live in nursing homes. So we believe this is not a federal issue, that this is a state issue.
State Senator John Frederickson says lawmakers have proposed restructuring Medicaid reimbursement rates in recent years.
69% of residents in nursing homes and long-term care facilities in Nebraska rely on Medicaid reimbursement. And so we need to ensure that those rates are appropriate for the services that they're getting, and also that they enable these facilities to be able to be sustainable.
But he doesn't think it should stop there.
We also need to look at this larger than just filling positions with bodies, and look at this more like to ensure that we have the population in Nebraska to sustain a vibrant state and economy. So are we creating a state and an environment that is appealing and attractive to young professionals to stay here and to live their lives here?
Carpenter says one thing the federal government could do to help is provide additional funding to pay for nursing homes. On your side, Joe Harris, 6 News.
The proposal Joe is telling you about is in the comment phase. We all have a chance to weigh in until November 6th. Nebraska Healthcare Association is working on after-school programs to get grade school children interested in the healthcare field.